Clifford. I mean, if you feed them for long enough, they know that you're the food giver. Gozor, the destructor. I'm trying to get Romeo and Clover to eat on my. That's Collie's daughter. She looks a lot like Collie's daughter.
Hello all. Started out with a little bit of goat footage there over at a friend's house today. This is what the sky has looked like in our part of Texas. Some pretty neat cloud formations. Got a bit of a transition going on right now with a high pressure area moving in, and let's cover that here. First, let me check that my audio is all queued up and looking good. Okay, I think we are set, so let's go right to it. High pressure across the central U.S., and we got this big high covering that part of the country. So north of that, if I can get my cursor back, we have this warm air advection up in southern Canada, right in this area. And on the south side of that, we have cold air advection in the eastern U.S. and around Tennessee and Kentucky, right in this area here. And that's due to the clockwise rotation around that high-pressure area. So basically picking up warm air in the desert southwest, bringing it north, and picking up cold air in this part of the country, especially up in Quebec, and bringing that south. So what do the fronts look like for this evening? I'll paint those out very quickly for you. Probably going to run a little bit like that. The Manitoba front is going to go to this low pressure area as an occlusion. Then of course we have the highs over the central U.S. Looks like a very old front, maybe in this area. See that bit of troughing off the Florida coast? And maybe a tail end of that extends into the Gulf, possibly even further south. Okay, anywhere else I missed? Not really. And the core of the polar air looks to be way up there on Baffin Island. So there's the core of the polar air. And I think those are almost all the important features. Actually, one more that I missed. See how we have very strong thickness gradient right here in northern Manitoba? So we remember how we put the front like that. It looks like there's another thickness gradient way up here. So possibly another front further to the north like that. So if you're forecasting up in the Northwest Territories or Nunavut, you would probably be watching that boundary for sure. And that could have some bearing on our weather here in the U.S. because this is an Arctic air mass source region. Okay, conditions across the U.S. are pretty quiet this evening. Little shower activity on the west coast as a new Pacific system comes inland. And let's see, I don't think we're quite ready for that. I'm going to save. Okay, I'm going to save those charts here. Let's take a look at the analysis very quick. Northwest Territories, what kind of temperatures do we have up there? Well, normally this time of year we see lows of about 5 and highs of about 20. So we're running pretty far above average there. 36 there in Northwest in Yellowknife. So they've got a very strong downslope component. This here is bad data. And to the north of that, you see that Arctic front. In fact, let me move the window a little bit. So you can kind of see just what a very strong front looks like in Nunavut this time of year. So south of that, you've got some pretty mild conditions, 45 there, 32 here. North of that, very gusty east winds and temperatures down in the single digits and tens. And this has kind of a relationship with the idea of prevailing westerlies down to the south and polar easterlies to the north. That's due to high pressure on the Arctic ice cap way up north that tends to blow southward, and then due to the Coriolis force, it starts recurving to the west. So we see that as kind of like a northeast wind through here, kind of a prevailing northeast wind. So we're seeing a little touch of that north of that front, and then south of there, there's those prevailing westerlies. Okay, south of that, main boundary in northern Manitoba. Where exactly would that front be? Let's see. Very, the gradients along the front are very smooth. Kind of a very slow fall off from warm weather in southern Saskatchewan to cold weather along Hudson Bay. But it looks like maybe in this area we've got probably just enough thermal contrast to mark the front. So west of that we have highs or temperatures in the upper 40s here, and then east of there temperatures a little bit cooler. So we would probably go ahead and just draw the front kind of like that, and maybe further north, probably the boundary way up there in northern Alberta. So elsewhere around the country, very strong northwesterly winds once again in New England. Temperatures in the 30s and 40s there. Southern U.S. is under the influence of that high pressure area that we showed you up in the Midwest. And we're getting a little bit of that cold air advection on the southeast side of that. And then remember, to the northwest of that high pressure area, which was over here, we had warm air advection. So that's kind of the pattern we have in place there. Temperatures in the 40s through that region. But the air mass is fairly dry, so with that warm air advection, we're not getting clouds and rain, which is commonly associated with that pattern there. And in Texas, where we are, looks like maybe kind of a weak front settling into the state. And yeah, just kind of weak north winds north of that. Okay, well, I've kind of dwelled on this for a little bit too long. There's actually not a whole lot going on. The main change is in the model data. And I've got AWIPS all set up here, and we'll take a look at what's happening over the next few days. Let me get this set up here. This is looking at the NAM model. We're going to look at the first 48 hours or so here. Okay. So there's the current conditions. You can see the main polar front jet well to the north. Got to go up all the way into Canada to find that. Very weak patterns across the U.S. So that's given us some very quiet weather, just this very weak cutoff low in western Texas. And we move forward, and we can see a trough moving through the northeast U.S. associated with that front coming out of Canada. Long wave ridge across the central U.S. And here comes a couple changes. The first shortwave trough coming through the Dakotas on Sunday. And then the next pattern is going to show up on the GFS. There's another part of that trough right there coming into Texas on Monday and Tuesday. So probably see a little bit of a frontal passage with that. Here's the GFS forecast. Let me run this back to the current time. Okay, there we go. High pressure across the Great Lakes. And let's see. First big change coming from this part of the country here in the Pacific Northwest. We're going up to 96 to 120 hours. And if you watch this area here, cyclogenesis right here in Montana and Wyoming. Let me run that back a few hours so you can see just where that comes from. Yeah, that's originating from Washington and Idaho, right in this area. So let's run that forward. This is Wednesday, November 16th. Going into Thursday, got a 990 low coming into the Dakotas. And that really deepens out to about 985 originally there. Here comes some new development in Missouri here on Friday. This will be a significant development because we may get some thunderstorms with that. And back behind it, looks like we're going to get our first good outbreak of very cold polar air coming southward. And you can see the models are predicting teens and 20s coming southward for the daytime temperatures, all the way down into the Dakotas. So this is a forecast here for Sunday evening. Temperatures in the 20s all the way down to the Ohio River Valley. So that's going to be a pretty good shot of cold air. And moisture, let me show you that very quickly. This is a very interesting graphic. This uses dew point temperature. And this is a good representation of air mass changes in the GFS model, because if we look at temperature, we see a lot of fluctuations with diurnal heating. But with dew point, the values are conserved. So they're not as affected by that kind of stuff. So you can really kind of see the air masses working their way around, like right here. You can see a change moving through here. Anyway, what I'm going to look at right here is the moisture streaming northward ahead of this Pacific system. This is going to be on Wednesday. And we see 8 Celsius values across Texas. That's going to be about 46 Fahrenheit. And that's going to come up rapidly as the moisture streams northward ahead of that system. So right now the surface low is located right there in the Dakotas. And a couple of interesting features. One is the very strong moisture advection ahead of it. See, now we're getting 16 Celsius in Texas. That's going to be a dew point of in the lower 60s. That's going to be supportive of thunderstorms. The other big feature, very dry air associated with subsidence behind the system in the central Rockies. So we can see dew points coming down to the single digits in this area and spreading eastward like that. And then the other feature we have is some wraparound moisture. So you recognize that comma system? So we run that forward. You can see this this looks to be probably about where we're going to find the MCS, assuming it does develop. This is Friday morning, and then this is Friday evening, right here. So there's a possibility by this time we may see some watch boxes, maybe something like that, for Friday evening. we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that there. And then behind it, look at this next air mass change. Very cold air, very dry air sweeping in southward through the plains. So you see that right there. So that's probably going to be some very cold air coming in there. This is November 20th through 21st. Looks very cold across the central part of the country. And one other way we can look at this is through precipitable water. This is what you might see on the GO satellite imagery for water vapor. And remember that this is sensitive mainly to the mid and upper levels of the troposphere. So I'm going to start this about 90 hours in the future, Tuesday. And we're running it forward. You can see 1 week shot of dry, cool air into the Midwest. The next system is coming right here. And yeah, watch that as it comes in right in this area. You can see that taking shape, kind of developing that comma shape. And ahead of that, here's this area of moisture starting to get organized ahead of it. There it goes. And now we're up to Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and now we've got precipitable water values of about 1.5 inches from Missouri all the way down to the Texas coast. And behind that, here's that very dry air in the central Rockies moving downslope. And so that'll move through the Midwest through the weekend, and then by Sunday, it works its way all the way to the northeast U.S. right there. And behind that, cool air coming in. So that'll be something to look forward to, and maybe we'll get to run a forecast lab with actual thunderstorms, which we haven't had in a while. So we'll see how that works out. Anyway, that's about all I got for tonight, and I appreciate you watching. And chat looks good. Thanks for checking in there, and I'll see you tomorrow.